down. If you are wanting to take a seat, please do so. We'll go ahead and get this thing kicked off here as soon as our folks up front have been seated. I appreciate you all coming here, midday no less, although it's nice to get in out of the heat. Thank you for those of you who maybe were just wandering by and wondered what was going on down here. But if you came here on purpose, I appreciate that. For law enforcement, for our legislators, for those who come from so many different arenas, other cabinet secretaries as well, some of whom you'll hear from, thank you for being here. We're here to talk about criminal justice reform specifically, in some of the things that we are going to put in place to address this and to be not just reactionary but very proactive here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. The purpose of today's meeting, let me just touch on a couple of housekeeping things. When we are done, we're happy to answer any questions from any of you in the media. For any of those that will come up here and speak, I would encourage you to hit us with whatever questions you have. I will also be willing to take questions unrelated to what we're going to talk about today, but let's save those until after we have addressed the topic at hand, if we could, please. I do think it's important that we focus on the specific task at hand, because for a long time, criminal justice here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky has not been as effective as we would hope it to have been. And the purpose of this today is I want to announce the formation of the Criminal Justice Policy Assessment Council. Criminal Justice Policy Assessment Council. The purpose of this council is to address the fact that we know that incarcerations have been on the rise, drug use and drug overdoses have been on the rise, recidivism has been on the rise. We've had so many issues that we all know about, we see about it, you cover it in the media. But what is it that we're doing to actually minimize these increasing numbers? What can we learn from other states? What can we learn from others that have gone before? What can we just put great minds together on from a bipartisan standpoint? Tom made a comment earlier to just looking at who was going to be seated here. It looked like it was going to be a bipartisan announcement. I hope that you find, with rare exception, the announcements that come out of this administration will be bipartisan in nature, because guess what? We're all Kentuckians. These issues affect every single one of us, our communities, our families, our homes, our churches, our businesses. Every one of us is touched by the need to have the best possible effort at criminal justice. And that goes toward criminal justice reform. The purpose of this today, I want to introduce briefly the people that will be on this council. I won't ask them to stand, although almost all of them are here today. I think there's only a couple that were not able to join us. I want to let you know as well that the first meeting of this council will be this afternoon at 1:30. We are going to break from here, and I'm going to have lunch with this entire group. That will not be open to the public. The lunch will not. However, over in the annex in room 171, it's open to all of you in the public, all of you in the media. The first meeting will take place at 1:30. And at that time, they are going to just make introductions amongst themselves, talk about what each of them bring to the equation, and make sure that we have the beginning of what will be very thoughtful dialogue to ensure that we address and lead the way on criminal justice reform. The members of this committee are going to be as follows. The chairman will be the Secretary John Tilley, who's the Secretary of Justice and Public Safety. Senator Whitney Westerfield, who is the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Representative Darrell Owens, who is the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. Secretary Derek Ramsey, who is the Secretary of the Labor Cabinet. Senator John Schickel, representing District 11 up in northern Kentucky. Senator Morgan McGarvey, Senate District 19 in Jefferson County. In fairness, I should say to Senator Schickel, Boone County. Shouldn't lump him in with northern Kentucky. He's from Boone County. Representative Denny Butler, who represents House District 39 in Jefferson County. Representative Chris Harris, who represents House District 93 in Martin and Pike counties. Justice Daniel Venters, who is a member of the Kentucky Supreme Court. Dr. Alan Brenzel, who is the Department of Behavioral Health Cabinet for Health and Family Services. Judge David Tapp, who is a judge in Pulaski Circuit Court, Judge Executive Tommy Turner from LaRue County, Amy Milliken, who is a Warren County attorney, Courtney Baxter, who is the Commonwealth Attorney representing Oldham, Henry, and Trimble counties, Commissioner Rick Sanders, who is Commissioner for Kentucky State Police, Damon Preston, who is a Department of Public Advocacy, Russell Coleman, who is with Kentucky Smart on Crime, Tom Jensen, who is a former state senator and a retired circuit court judge, Anthony Smith, who's the executive director of Cities United, Jason Woolsey, who is the Grayson County jailer, Pastor Bob Russell, former senior pastor of Southeast Christian Church, Bishop William Medley, who's with the Diocese of Owensboro, and Dave Atkinson, who is the president and CEO of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. This group is remarkably experienced. This group has a tremendous perspective from a whole variety of views that are going to be important as we address criminal justice reform. It is my intent that Kentucky will lead the way, that we will become a beacon for other states to follow, and that we will address some of the very issues that we've talked about. With that said, I want to have a few words from our Secretary of the Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, John Tilley.
Thank you, Governor. Many of you, our first meeting was well chronicled, I think, and several meetings after that I had with the governor. I've spent the majority of my professional career in the criminal justice system. It's now 23 years, despite my youthful appearance. It's been a long time, Lisa. And from the moment I sat down with this governor, I felt like he too had spent 23 years in the criminal justice system. He understands, as all of these policymakers and thought leaders and public servants do, those in law enforcement, and spend time in the courtrooms, spend time in mental health facilities, addiction recovery centers, in our churches, dealing with people in distress, that our system is badly broken and is in need of reform. And despite the fact that we've made significant reforms over the past several years, we remain in distress, as most states do. Kentucky now hopes to join 30 states, as we have done in the past, at making additional reforms, as the federal government lags behind but is now finally coming to the table. The case for reform makes itself. The numbers jump off the page, and we'll learn that over the next 6 months of intensive review and study. We'll drill down behind the numbers, and I think the case will make itself. But what strikes me about this governor and about this task force is that it's not just about the numbers. As I visited prisons with Governor Bevin, I noticed one thing about him that I did not know before: his ability to connect with people. And I'm not talking about people on the outside of those walls. I'm talking about the very people that we hope to serve, those people behind those walls. Stories of redemption and restoration and hope. He shared those. They shared with him. And I was reminded just last week, as he was visiting another prison, I was at the Marion County Detention Center. And for those of you who hadn't had a chance to visit there, I hope you do. When you walk in, it feels more like a recovery center. State inmates all over the Commonwealth, as our corrections commissioner will tell you, seek to get there. And we hope to make all our facilities like that when we have several that are doing just as good work. But when I had a chance to speak to those individuals there, they shared with me their stories. And again, I was reminded that each one of those inmates, nearly 24,000 that we now have in Kentucky, each have a family. Most of them have children. One of them I spoke with hadn't seen his daughter in some time, and she called him Dad for the first time on her 21st birthday because of the recovery that he was getting behind those walls. But sadly, that's not the norm. We are not doing what we should do to cut reoffense rates, to allow folks to recover, to knock down those barriers that exist when they leave the prison. And so those will be the solutions we present in the next 6 months that could come in the form of an omnibus bill, could come in the form of a more surgical approach with several legislative packages. But I'm going to put that in the hands of the 22 colleagues I'll have on this task force to aid in that. The governor had a chance to go over each one of these names, but I hope you take time to understand that this list was arrived at in painstaking fashion to make sure that every stakeholder was represented in the criminal justice process, and we left some very worthy voices off this list because we at some point had to fit everybody in the room. But I've had the pleasure in my time of working on these issues with so many of these folks. I know Tom Jensen is here I think he was here to my right. Had a great time with him in our last effort in 2011, and I've had the opportunity now to work with Senator Westerfield and so many folks in the House and Senate. He'll be joining us again. And I hope that you listen closely to the stories that you'll hear from Nathan and West as they tell you their personal journeys. And I hope you also understand that a young man could not be here today. His name is Nathan. He couldn't be here today because he was caring for a sick family member. Again, reinforcing the notion, he's been in recovery 6 years, that he is now caring for a sick family member. So restoration and redemption is possible. So with that, I want to recognize one of the task members who will have a critical role in this, along with Chairman Darrell Owens in the House. Senator Whitney Westerfield has become a dear friend of mine. Obviously, the Hopkinsville connection is well chronicled. But Whitney, I'd like to introduce the Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Whitney Westerfield.
Good afternoon. I'm thankful to the governor. I'm thankful to Secretary Tilley for leading this effort. Secretary Tilley, before he was secretary, and I, as co-chairs, had a number of conversations over the last 4 years about this very effort, about doing something just like this. But other things normally crowded the way, and those things were important. Those things were significant and took a lot of time and attention. And I'm proud of those efforts. Some of those things are national models. House Bill 463, which predates me. Senate Bill 200, the Juvenile Justice Reform Bill 2 years ago, that is now a national model that's being used by other states, South Dakota, Kansas, West Virginia. The dating violence bill that was pushed and finally got through in 2015. The heroin bill, Senate Bill 192 last year, that's making a difference, though we still see and hear how we can do more work in that regard. Each one of these was an important accomplishment and an enormous milestone in its own right, but none of them took on the full task of looking at Kentucky's criminal code to make sure it is doing what it's supposed to do for the victims of a crime, for the accused, for every person that's in the system. And it gives me a lot of joy to know that that's what we're here to start doing. I'm excited about the aggressive schedule that we have. I'm glad that we're starting today to get that work done, and I look forward to what we can accomplish in 2017 so that we can bring our criminal justice system and our code up to modern standards and achieve better outcomes for the people of Kentucky that go through it, that are touched by it, and for the taxpayers that foot the bill for it. Thank you.
Chosen MC. Next, we'll have a good friend of mine as well from the House, Representative Chris Harris. I know is a man of principle, and he'll represent, again, a voice from that chamber. Chris Harris.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Governor. I should call you Mr. Secretary instead of John.
John is fine.
Secretary and I graduated from law school together. But thank you all for asking me to be a part of this council. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to treat this initiative for criminal justice reform as an opportunity. And it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to build on the redemptive philosophy that we achieved with the passage of the felony expungement legislation that was sponsored for so many years by Chairman Owens. You know, as a former prosecutor, I know that we can't continue to incarcerate our way out of the problems that are facing our Commonwealth. Many of those are rooted in addiction and mental health. And being from Eastern Kentucky, I know the problems that we have with drug abuse. Addressing these pervasive issues is the key to solving the problems of the revolving door of incarceration and allowing these folks to re-enter the workforce and society and be productive members. This effort should strive to seek a more substantive, humane, and productive long-range solutions, with an S, solutions, that will benefit Kentuckians in the future of the Commonwealth. So I look forward to being a voice, a strong voice, one of many strong voices on this council, to try to help make Kentucky a better future. Thank you.
Speaking of that expungement bill that was so ably sponsored and championed by Representative Owens, is a gentleman from my hometown, West Powell, who first spoke at a meeting that Chairman Westerfield and I gathered in our hometown of Hopkinsville. And I think he's inspired a number of us, but I think his story will inspire you. Keep in mind there are thousands of West Powells, literally thousands of his stories across the Commonwealth. West, would you come share with us your personal story?
Thanks, everybody, for coming here today. Thank you, Governor, Secretary Tillery, Representative Westerfield. My name is Wes Powell. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, but I was raised in northern Kentucky, Covington. I graduated from Holmes High School, class of '88. Well, unfortunately, back in 1989, I made a stupid mistake of stealing a couple car radios from a junkyard. Well, that ended up giving me a 2-year sentence for that. I think one for each radio. I ended up going to prison for a year for that. And while in prison, guards, all the inmates, they just knew I'd be back. They just knew that, I guess most people come back, and time and time again, I said, I'm not coming back. This is not living. I gave you a year of my life. I'll never give you any more. I got out, paid my restitution. I did find it incredibly hard to get a job. I had some children, and that was, additional pressure. I got to provide for my family now, and still couldn't get a job. I eventually opened up my own computer business. I couldn't find a job, so I made one. I still do that to this day, and now I'm back in school to get my PTA. And I was worried about, this felony on my record because they're going to do a background check. And that started me to seeing if I can get it expunged. I found out that there was nothing on the books that could help me get that off my record. And I had already been in school for a while, so it was, I've done all this for nothing. I ended up getting a call asking me to come and testify at a hearing in Hopkinsville, and I guess you guys know the rest is history. This is very important for, people coming out of prison. When you go to prison, you basically, it's a college, really, for criminals. You go in, you come out, they have you sit around with all these criminals, and either you learn to be a better criminal, or you regret what you did to get in there in the first place and want to come out and never go back. Unfortunately, most people go in the same way they came out, except a little bit smarter with criminology, basically. So they end up going back. They come out with no hope or weapons to move forward. So they're basically stuck in a rut. It's sad, but it's true. We got to do something about, give these people some type of trade training, education, something to give them something to move forward with in their lives. That's the only way I see we can stop people from returning. It's just a revolving door. But that's my story. That was 27 years ago. And come July 1st, hopefully I'm going to be the first one to file to get my expungement and get this felony off my record that's been on there for so long and has haunted me forever. Thank you.
I think West's story illustrates a couple of points that as he served a year prison term, which again, I don't question the decision made for that sentence. I can't look back, but I do know when I say that our system is badly broken, Sadly, we have public officials that have absconded with taxpayer dollars in the neighborhood of six figures and will never serve a day in prison. But West served 1 year in prison for 2 car radios, and there are thousands of Wests across this Commonwealth. So when we say the system is broken, I think we need to look at making it more fair and more just and a stronger system at that. When I say that, I want, and I think the governor wants all of us to know as well in this task force, that public safety will be paramount. Public safety will be number one. Nothing will risk public safety. In no way will this effort risk public safety. Nothing we do. Everything will be assessed to benefit and enhance public safety. But there is a point at which incarceration has a diminishing return, at which, as West pointed to, those inmates become criminogenic. In other words, their risk for greater crime occurs upon their release instead of decreases. And that'll be our aim moving forward. And it's our hope that by saving those precious tax dollars that we spend in incarceration, now well over the 22,000 number we used some time ago, we can reinvest those dollars in law enforcement, to proper policing and prosecution of the crimes we need to be protected from. With that said, we also are now going to hear from Nathan Teague, who also has an inspiring story as well. Nathan, would you join us?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for having me here. My story starts out a little bit like Wes's. Kind of young, 24 years old, kind of got mixed up in the wrong crowd, became engulfed in addiction, ended up getting some Class D nonviolent felonies in 2009. Going to jail for a little bit, getting released, going to Chad's Hope Teen Challenge in Manchester, Kentucky in 2010. Kind of giving my life to the Lord, changed my life around. There's a bunch of guys there with Unite vouchers. Unite helps people get into Teen Challenge. Since then, it's been a nightmare. I ended up getting a job at a restaurant because a restaurant's one of the only few jobs you can get with a felony haunting your record. I've been working at the same restaurant for almost 7 years now. I'm now a manager there. But since then, I've had tons of opportunities to get this job, that job, with benefits and retirement and something to provide for my family. I've got 3 beautiful children now and a wife, and it's just very frustrating having opportunities come up and going through the process of actually getting your life together and starting to feel positive, and then a background check just knocks you down for something that you did as a child, as a young man, and it just continues to haunt you through your entire life. It's a nightmare. I can't express my opinion in voting. I can't vote. Can't do anything because this thing that I did 7 years ago continues to haunt me. So I'm very, very in favor of all this that's going on, and I really hope that something changes, not only for Kentucky, but for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you again for members of the council for being here. And I just want to reiterate the purpose of this. I think you've gotten some appreciation for. America has always been a land of second chances. This nation was founded by people, many of whom came here for a second chance, for an opportunity at redemption from some sort or another. And I think we owe nothing less. I do want to reiterate a couple of things that I was struck by as they were said here, and then we'll open it up for questions that you might have. In no way, shape, or form is anything that comes out of this council that's going to have my support. No piece of legislation that I will get behind, no piece of legislation that I will sign will do anything, as was noted, to diminish how we protect the people of the Commonwealth. That is a fact. I'm a big believer that there should be consequences for decisions made. Penance should be paid. When people make mistakes, they should be held to account. The law matters. The rule of law matters. The greatness of America, the greatness of the Commonwealth is the fact that we are a nation of laws. These things matter. I want to make sure that's very, very clear. That said, there are smarter and better ways we can go about the application of those laws. Last week I was in LaGrange. I met with a whole room full of men who were there, some of whom had been in and out their entire adult lives. One man had been in there for all but 21 months of the last 27 years. He'd been in and out 4 or 5 times. There was another man who was 52 years old, the first time he'd ever been in prison in his life. These are men who are fathers, their sons, their husbands, their brothers, their uncles. They're members of your community. They're people that have worked with you, people who've crossed paths with you. These are real people. Their stories matter. They're paying their time, and they know they deserve to. To a person they recognize, and one of them said probably created more agreement among this group that I was meeting with than anything else, when he said, listen, let's be honest, at the end of the day, we're all in here because of a decision we made on purpose by ourselves. It's our fault. This is why we're here. Their acknowledgement of that, I think, is the beginning of a road to recovery. But we, as the Commonwealth, owe them an opportunity to pay their dues to society, to pay their debt to society, to pay back that which they have incurred an obligation to pay back, and then to be given a chance to reassimilate, because to not do so comes at a burden and a cost economically, emotionally, behaviorally, criminally, that we frankly can't afford to bear. We, the Commonwealth, nor should we. We owe it to people the opportunity to reassimilate. The task that has been given to this council is to come up with solutions, as we said, the very best solutions to ensure that we protect the Commonwealth, but provide people an ability to not end up in criminology 101, 201, 301, but to have a shot at redemption, an opportunity for a second chance. That is the whole purpose of this. The net result of it will be to come forward with pieces of legislation that, starting in 2017, we will pass into law, and I look forward to doing it. Any questions that we can answer for any of you, of any of the people here? And if it's of one of them, they'll come back up and take the mic. I'll let you speak to that, as the chairman. And let me just say this also, given my schedule, it will be an aggressive schedule. And given the nature of that schedule, I personally will not be able to attend each meeting. So my designee, my liaison, while she's not an official member of this team, will be our Lieutenant Governor, Janine Hampton, a dear friend of mine, somebody who I trust, who understands how I think and vice versa, and who is going to be my liaison directly to the team for those meetings that I'm not able to attend. But Secretary, why don't you address the schedule?
An aggressive schedule. It's anticipated the first couple of months there'll be one meeting, and the next 2 months. The time and length of that meeting is yet to be determined. I don't think we'll stick to the normal committee meeting time of a couple of hours. I think they'll probably spill over. We'll intend to break, sometimes half a day, full day. Toward the fall, we'll probably move toward a twice a month schedule at a minimum. But the key to this effort and the size of the task force is intentional, because the key to the effort will be to use the expertise of each of these thought leaders and public servants to break down into subgroups and work on their own time and on their own schedules, sometimes from their homes and offices, to bring back solutions to these problems that we face. So in that regard, it will be an incredibly ambitious and aggressive schedule. And that's the way we intend to do it. Again, that's the way the governor's directed this process. As you know by now, he's a governor of action, and that's what we intend to take.
If so many of these crimes are drug-related, either the use of them, the selling of them, or the committing of crimes to get the money to buy them, is part of the, and we know how expensive it is to treat those drug-addicted folks in jail themselves, as opposed to having them in a conventional cell. Are you looking toward possibly shifting some of those dollars for corrections toward paying for treatment, or giving treatment options to them, providing they're able to pay for it themselves?
Yeah, I'm going to let the governor start, and then I'll fill in.
Yeah, let me make one quick comment on this. I want to make sure it is very clear what is driving this. And your question is a good one in that it raises a couple of issues. What is the cost of this? What is the benefit of this? I'm a business person. I do a cost-benefit analysis of things. This is how I operate. It's how I think. But I want to make very clear the purpose of this is how do we best serve everyone in Kentucky? Because a properly functioning, effective, safety providing, opportunity providing, rehabilitation providing criminal justice system, when operating well, benefits every single person in the Commonwealth. And the focus is going to be breaking into task force and looking at a number of different silos of issues that all come together in our criminal justice system. In addressing them, I am absolutely confident that we will come up with efficiencies. Those efficiencies will result in saved dollars. There's no doubt in my mind. Anything that operates effectively, smoothly, and efficiently is going to be more cost effective. It just is. And those savings have the ability to be poured back not only into the things you mentioned, but frankly, everything else in the Commonwealth that we care about. Every single thing that any one of you cares about, if it comes at the help of taxpayer dollars, we will have more of those dollars to be able to take care of everything. So the point of this is to do the right thing. And we will ultimately do well by doing good.
Let me just add to that question. I want the reporter to... We've already increased treatment in this state by 1,200% since about 2004. Those are state beds only, not private options. So we already have that kind of increase since the year 2004, and that's been intentional. We still don't have enough treatment beds. The problem with treatment generally is that it oftentimes is just as effective in prison as it can be. Oftentimes it's not. It depends on the offender and the treatment model. We have driven some treatment to community-based resources. Our community mental health centers, that's also been intentional. We haven't been asleep at the wheel to this point, certainly. We just can do it better. We continue to look at ways to do it better. So yes, every option is on the table, as the governor mentioned, to get the best return on our dollar and get the best outcome for those folks we intend to treat, the very folks we need to serve. Let me say that to your point as well, any prosecutor, and I spent 9 years either working for a prosecutor or prosecuting cases myself, and any one of them will tell you today, as they did even 10 years ago, that the figure is probably more like 90% or more of all crime is drug-related, either has to do with drug use. The problem is sometimes there are addicts who, again, commit property crimes, commit other crimes, oftentimes, sadly, commit violent crimes, and they're serving time and have to be treated in prison for not only that addiction, but the mental illness that often comes with it.
We've had this conversation before about the persistent felony statute, which was originally written to cover only those who've been in prison. It's been embellished and expanded many, many times. It's very difficult to confront that issue.
That's right.
Prosecutors support for it, and this task force or this commission address that in an effective way to reduce prison population.
The question is whether or not the persistent felony offender statute can be addressed in this task force, even with resistance from some in the prosecutorial community, was your question, Ronnie. And to that point, we did address that. We did look at it and discuss it in the context of House Bill 463's discussions. If you remember, we did not touch the penal code. We only modernized the drug code and looked at probation and parole reentry and a lot of programmatical aspects of our criminal justice system. Everything will be on the table. It is a tough row to hoe when you talk about that, although I will say Kentucky has one of the harshest persistent felony offender laws in the country, and I think some proportionality needs to be discussed with regard to that law. With 463, we did eliminate the drug enhancements, possessory enhancements that went along with enhancing a felony and bumping it up to another level as the PFO statute does. The PFO statute has been viewed in Kentucky for some time as a bit of a 2 strikes and you're out, when, as you know, at the federal level, the 3 strikes and you're out model has gone by the wayside to a certain extent. So with that said, I think there'll be some discussion, but that's not to say we'll act on it. I think there'll have to be some meaningful discussion.
Secretary Tilly, in 2011, the legislature passed the penal code. 4 of you were part of that. At the time, the prison inmate population was about 22,000 state inmates. Now we're about 23,000.
That's right.
And an even greater percentage of them are lodged in a local jail as compared to a state prison.
That's right.
Where there's often fewer resources. What went wrong 5 years ago?
I don't know. Well, let me first of all say the reason that the effort was named the Penal Code Task Force was the decision of an LRC staff member at that time. We didn't actually touch the Penal Code. That was a misnomer. I will tell you that a couple of things and be upfront about that. We have had some successes and some great successes with 463. The idea that we haven't driven the prison population down is real. But some estimate the prison population today to be at 27, 28, 29, even 30,000. We're now at 23.5 roughly. We dipped to 19 at one point. We stabilized the population without question. We don't know what costs or what we avoided in terms of how many could be in prison today. What we do know is that the crime rate has remained stable as it has since the 1970s. We remain one of the safest states in the country. There is some level of incapacitation that contributes to that, although a small part of it. If any talk to any criminologist or any expert on the issue, to say now that we need to look at implementation of 463, I think, is the key. We're finding that the bill's not being implemented because there is so much discretion left to the system. So I think where you find the bills being implemented in the program, such as the SMART program, which Judge Tapp will tell you is working amazingly well in his courtroom, and then the 9 other courtrooms across the state in which that program is piloted. But we'll touch on all those. We'll touch on mandatory reentry supervision and how it's working and saving the Commonwealth $1 million a month now with no threat to public safety. In fact, those offenders who come out of that program come out less likely to offend. So there is success there. What we now have to look at is stabilizing again the prison population, working to drive it down, and maintaining public safety. Yeah, Governor.
Noticeably absent today and from the list is a representative from the Attorney General's office.
No,
if
sir.
you're going to attack this issue, why not bring someone on from the Attorney General's office? And is the lack of someone from the AG's office on this panel a sign of the relationship right now between the governor's office and the AG's office?
Not even a little. I mean, you look at the qualifications of the people. I defy anyone to look at the 22 people on this council and tell me that there is any constituency that is not represented, including those who prosecute crimes in this state. Commonwealth attorneys, we have judges, we have absolute ample representation, and the people who are on this committee were chosen very intentionally for their qualifications, for their knowledge of this actual topic, and for their ability to bring that knowledge and those qualifications to bear in a very bipartisan program, because again, the partisanship should have nothing to do with this or anything else. And as was noted, as it relates to this, and unlike other things that have been done in the past, where maybe we do panels and we do blue ribbon studies or whatever the case might be, I'm not interested in another something that goes on a shelf and is dusty. In the Commonwealth, I was elected to fix things that are broken. This is my job. And so I take this very seriously. And this is a group of people who will come forward with ideas, and my intent is to see these ideas be turned into legislation that will be passed, that we will all be better for. Because I'm not going to sit around and wait and hope that things get better. If there is something that needs to be fixed, that is my responsibility to step forward and fix it. Other questions?
Add to that.
Again, you want to...
Well, let me touch on that.
Add on it?
There's some thought to that, but in the Attorney General's office is the Prosecutor's Advisory Council that is under the Attorney General's office, and there are 2 members, both a prosecutor from the County Attorneys Association and the Commonwealth Attorney. So that is actually 2 members from the Attorney General's office.
If everything is on the table, would that also include decriminalizing certain levels of possession, even of strong narcotics, even of heroin, with the caveat that the person charged with those goes immediately in prison?
I think it would be remarkably inappropriate and presumptuous to guess as to what this committee will come forward with in terms of suggestions. And so I don't even want to hazard a guess as to what that will be. All I know is we've got good people, thoughtful people, informed people who will come forward with ideas, and those ideas will drive what ultimately will or will not be the policy decisions that come out of this. No, I mean, again, these are the kind of things we're talking about are systemic. They are deep and meaningful. And it's important for all of you to understand, and this goes to whether it's these things, whether it's board reorganizations, any of these things ultimately have to be confirmed by the legislature. So as it relates to executive action, of course, I hope you appreciate the fact they are not in session. When they are not in session, we don't just sit around and wait till next January to fix the problems that ail us. This is not how we operate, certainly not how I intend to operate. So I have taken and I will take, where I think it is value added and appropriate, executive action, the vast majority of which ultimately needs to be confirmed especially as it relates to a number of decisions that I've made even thus far. The same would be the case here. I'm not trying to get the cart before the horse. I'm really not. I think the key is these people know collectively and individually a lot more about this topic than I do. And they're in good hands with Chairman Secretary Tilley, who's chairing this group. They will come forward with good ideas. We will put those into thoughtful pieces of policy. Those will then be shepherded through the various House and Senate channels by members of this committee and others. And ultimately, that's what will hit my desk, because I believe the right kind of things will pass easily.
How much flexibility do you have fiscally, given what you've locked into for the next 2 years?
I mean, again, we have a tremendous amount of latitude with respect to making the right decisions. Making the right decisions is what we'll do.
Broaden this out a little bit if we can.
Okay, and yes, and
So Tilly said everything's on the table here. Can you give us some, for examples, of the kinds of things you're looking at that you want to try to make a difference?
Proportionality, really the problem with the penal code, and that it was a model code in 1974, and really most hailed that as again, and it was referred to as the model code. The Kentucky Penal Code was built from the national model code. It was put together with a ton of thought about how it works. It's like a good machine, a well-oiled machine, if you will, each part dependent on the other. And in those intervening years up until now, it's become a patchwork of dysfunctionality. There's no consistency, no rhythm. Prosecutors and defense attorneys will tell you the same thing. We have got to look at bringing that back in to some logical pattern and back to its roots, if you will, from 1974. And that'll be the big focus. And along the way, we're going to have to look at anything that can address the drug scourge that we're experiencing now, that seems to envelop us. With every success, we have a step backward. And that's what every state is experiencing now. But I think we can lead the country, as we have with prescription drug laws now and synthetic drug laws, and our approach is there.
let me do this in fairness, because we are running a bit late. I'm going to ask the council, if you would, let's go ahead and convene to lunch. I'll stay here and answer questions from you all for another couple moments, as will Secretary Tilley. But if all of those of you that are going to join us for lunch, please do so. And this meeting that was going to be over in the Capitol Annex, room 171 at 1:30, let's just make a command level decision here that it'll be 1:45 to afford us the time to get over there, if that's all right. Does that work?